So how do you learn those solos?
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where you just start like everybody else does. You start with your ear, right? It's one of those things where you have to develop it. You know, no matter what level you're at, whether you're just beginning or whether you've been there for a while, you know, it all starts with your ear. And my first piece of advice for stuff like that, when you go to pick up a new track, you like this new song, you got to figure out how the guitarist did it, is just work on it, you know, because even if you don't get it accurately, you're building your ear, you're working on that kind of stuff. And one cool thing that you guys have today that maybe I didn't back, you know, when I was some of your ages and stuff like that, was, you know, things like Transcribe and Guitar Pro and Power Tab and all of those cool programs, not to mention the thousands upon thousands of YouTube videos that you guys got.
Yeah.
So,
including this one tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So that's obviously where it starts with, but then you can also develop your ear too, and you know, when you learn your intervals and you learn things of that nature, it helps you be able to categorize, you know, when you hear somebody move up a perfect fourth or a perfect sixth or anything like that, you know, you'll be able to hear it instantly because you've worked on that. But then, add on top of that, you know the person that you're playing. You get to know, for this case, Marty Friedman, right? Very killer guitarist.
Yeah.
Big influence. And so, you know, when you get to know somebody's idiosyncrasies, you begin to kind of rely on them. They're in your toolbox, you know. When you hear a new riff or something like that, you're like, oh, you know what? I think maybe he's doing that major sharp 11 arpeggio again, or something like that, you know. So you begin to draw on those things, and that's really, I mean, it starts the same way with everybody, but just be meticulous.
And that's how it's done. Now, I want to talk about one other thing with that, because that tune's actually a really good example of especially thrash metal playing, and definitely what we do in Megadeth, which is the right hand picking, because obviously we're all dazzled by Chris's left hand shredding all over the neck, and I grew up in the shred bass era. Guys like Jaco Pastorius were doing to the bass what Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen were doing on the guitar, right?
Yeah.
So the unforgivable sin that we probably all did is we got all like noodly over here, and then we get in the studio, and has anybody ever recorded themselves? And you find out on day one that what? Your timing sucks, right? Right? First thing all of us discover is like, wait a minute, you know? And that's that's a wake-up call, because all of a sudden we realize that you know, we've spent a lot of time learning chords, learning all kinds of stuff over here in the left hand, but the picking hand, I should say, or the plucking hand, is so important, because that's really where the meter and where the time is. And that's why when you hear bands like AC/DC who aren't shredding all the time, but they're just playing simple chords. I mean, listen to Malcolm Young. I mean, that guy is a rhythm guitar player if there ever was one. And he's kind of played the same 6 or 7 chords his entire career. But man, that guy throws down, right? Same with like Rudolf Schenker, you know, from the Scorpions, right? James Hetfield, you know, it's one of the things Dave Mustaine does great. It's like, man, just these killer rhythm parts. And as a bass player, you know, obviously, again, we talked about that earlier with Symphony, kind of pulling that together. But, you know, that's, you know, the down picking thing is, you know, where's mine? Keeping those real even. And one of the things that I do is, by the time I get to the solo, I actually switch off the down picking and I come over to what we call butterfly picking, which is the up and down strokes. Now, it's real important that when you're doing your down strokes, they're real even. Now, I'm adding those accents because that's the control I want to have on it. But when it comes time to then do the butterfly picking, make sure that it's even. So that it's real even and it lays right in there, so that you can't, you know, when you really pull that up under the microphone in the studio, that it really sounds nice and even, and it kind of gets that nice motorboat thing. And for me, it's a matter of feel. You know, under the solo, I feel like there needs to be more of a glide, a little less obtrusive smack on the string, and a little kind of more just gliding, because then it allows the solo to soar over top of that.
You know, one thing I never noticed, absolutely, this is the truth, I never noticed this before, but the way you palm mute. Actually, on the bass. I've never seen a bass player palm mute, really.
Basically, what I do is it's pretty much what guitar players would do, really, and I just, you know, mute with the kind of the meat of my palm right here, back here, and then I lift up off of it because. that control. And you know, it's funny, I grew up playing with a pick because I could afford amps about this big, even though this is actually a really expensive little amp. But the amps that I grew up with, you know, back in Minnesota where I grew up, you know, guitar players would roll in with these 50-watt, 100-watt Marshall amps, and it just blow the roof off the place. And I had my like little 100-watt amps, and I could never be heard over it. So part of, you know, playing with a pick gave me this tone, right? As opposed to, in fact, I don't even know how to mute that, because, right? I get guys come to me sometimes, dude, I play with my fingers. How do you mute that? I'm like, I don't know. You're on that one. Because that's a big part of it. Is you know, how you play isn't just the shred them. You know, and it isn't just the strum, it's kind of the whole package put together, you know. So I guess my bass playing style really developed kind of partly out of a survival skill. I started with a pick as a kid, but then as I kept playing and Dave and I met and we started writing these Megadeth songs, all of a sudden I found it's like, man, I can really play the tune like it's meant to be played and be able to jump in and pick up, you know, be able to pick up fast licks, but also be able to go, have it really lock in with the guitar so that it really sounded like it was one.
You want to take it, let's take it from the solo and out to the end of Tornadoes. So we're just going to play it without track. But one thing I think it's also really cool at the end of the song is how you ascend again. How you use the ascending bass line.
You know, that's the thing.
Guitar line.
I always loved really aggressive bass players, you know? I mean, certainly Gene Simmons was one of my favorites, because anybody who can spit blood and breathe fire and play bass is just...
Yeah.
But it's aggressive, you know, and there were other records that I heard over the years, you know, things that weren't even metal records, you know, like I remember the Tubes had a record that came out when I just moved to LA, and I think Steve Lukather had played a lot of guitar on it or something, and the bass playing was just aggressive, and even like Joe Jackson, I remember one morning on Saturday morning cartoons, Joe Jackson was on the show, and he had this bass player, and it was like real punk rock. You know, and that's the thing that I love about punk rock bass playing, even though they, you know, sling it down, right? And I can't do that because I can't palm mute very good down there, so I got to kind of have my instrument up a little bit higher. And it's actually, I don't know about you, but I have basses on different strap lengths throughout the show, depending on the tunes that we're going to play, because sometimes I need to have it up a little bit higher. In fact, Peace Sells, I've got this new bass that we're going to actually break out from Jackson that right now we're calling it the Kelly Bird. But it actually, the neck is set way out here, and I actually have to have it up higher so that when I can actually pull that lick off, you know? Because if I have it down here, you know, if we do the old, you know, punk, you know, I suck, right? It doesn't work. so that's a big part of that. So, you know, kind of onto this end of Tornado is really just getting aggressive with it, you know what I mean? And really, you know, putting some energy into the track, so. Okay, yeah, you count it off.
Do it.